Imagine one of fashion's most celebrated designers, a designer whose collection changed the way people thought about fashion. A designer known for extraordinary creativity, theatrically, and craftsmanship. Now imagine that same designer becoming one of the industry's most controversial figures. That designer is John Galliano. In 2011, Galliano's career was nearly destroyed after he made anti-Semitic and racist remarks that were all over the media. He lost his position at Dior, stepped away from fashion, and eventually began rebuilding his career. And now, years later, the Metropolitan Museum of Art is putting his work at the center of the 2027 Met Gala. So here's the question. Can fashion forgive John Galliano? Or perhaps the better question is, can fashion celebrate the work without forgetting the person behind it? Welcome to Fashion Pulse, where we look beyond the clothes to examine the culture, business, and systems that make up fashion. So today, we're talking about John Galliano and the 2027 Met Gala, which, as you know, Devin, has already created so much controversy considering his background. And we just wanted to address that today and get our viewpoint as far as not just fashion, but also talk about the branding side of it and what words and actions can do to your brand. But this is so we're talking about creativity, controversy, and accountability in the way fashion industry decides who gets remembered and who gets another chance. So let's start with the obvious question. Devin, what made, because we need a little bit of background, right? I mean, so what made him an important designer in the first place?
Well, like you said, he was a graduate from St. Martin's. Like everybody else, like Stella McCartney, McQueen, have all graduated from that school. And he has been a creative director for Givenchy. But his most catapulted fame, like any '90s person knows, he 1987 he was the creative director of Dior, and throughout his tenure there up until 2010, he has created out there collections that were shock value, but again were wearable. He created a saddlebag. He made shoes that were popped. He made coutures that were elaborate and great. So it was a collection. It was a creation of campiness, and also sometimes it can be infamous. Sometimes it can be a bit of colorism. It can be a little bit of a little racial tones. But again, it was wearable to every celebrity on that runway. And we got Charlize Theron as our Dior girl, our first ever Dior brand ambassador through those years.
So, so a little bit more history, perhaps, like his rise into fashion. What made him stand out there in your mind?
I just think for like so many '90s designers, like I said, his way of creating couture creations, wearables art that really was about just bringing it to the. It was like a theatrical thing. It was it was costumey, but it was also showcasing the designing and the craftsmanship that he has done, and through all his times into every house that he has been.
So that was kind of his trademark, the theatrics, right? That's
Yes.
what really put him out there.
Yes.
What about his time at Dior? Like, what was your opinion of him as a designer?
I think he was an amazing designer. I feel like a lot of times when I was a teenager and I was always there were so many things about him that was amazing that I take um take for instance his collection of Rasta in 2007, which I mean, if you see the campaigns for Dior, it was always beautiful. It was made, everything was there. I think you see people who were on a run on red carpets like 1997 Oscars. Nicole Kidman wore this beautiful green chartreuse number with embroidery at the Oscars, and that made him stand out. But also that now there was a, I think the same season, um, I think Celine Dion wore that backless suit from Dior, and it was very much uh, it was Mary was a it wasn't the best dress, but it was still a standout moment. Some of his greatest collections were standout, and it was more of a way of him showcasing the designer that he is.
Okay, so it was more the theat. So his rise into fashion, his the theatrical as well as the craftsmanship is what he was known for. But we eventually look into now we go up into 2011, right? And I did some of the research. I read some of the media posts. Um, 2011. That was I was in my mid 30s at that point.
I was in my 20s.
So the he was like a lot of designers I think out there that you've seen in the past. They had their own problems, right?
Yes, I did.
Like they dealt with things in a and because John Galliani had a lot of his own troubles and a lot of stress as the creative director for Dior at that time.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, his means of coping with that were not the healthiest, but we're not going to get into that.
No.
It's the conversation would the purpose behind bringing that it up is to then stem into what eventually led to his downfall at Dior, and what ended his career as designer. Uh, is he apparently at that time, as reported, was out at a bar, had made racist and anti-Semitic remarks to several people at the bar, along with a physical assault, which um, is not a good thing at any time. 2011, that was before the idea of racism but came to the forefront. But it's always been in the background because you think of anti-Semitic meaning making remarks against Jewish people.
Yes.
Coming back to the World War II and whatnot, that was still very fresh. And then it was a remarks that should not be made in public at all by anybody, but for a man that was in his place as the creative director and the face of Dior was devastating.
It was, because the thing about it was, and it was anti-Semitic, because since then we had people disowning his wearable clothes, and then they had to the people at the house had to create a collection after that, and that was kind of like, and the thing was, then we had another ambassador, Natalie Portman, who is Jewish descent, who is Jewish, denouncing him wearing clothes, and then also you have Jamie King, who was a model who has been amusing for Dior, denouncing his, and like we had a lot of celebrities that were denouncing. It was a lot of stuff happening, and then they had to find a career director. Then it was going to be Raf Simons, who has his own label, and he has done collections after Dior, like from Calvin Klein to now recently Prada. But he took over the helm after that because it was a touch and go for a while for what was, and I think it was like it took him to a point of like obscurity, and he wasn't able to do anything else. And I think it was a time where it was like, you know what, he needed to reset. I think creative directors take a lot of pressure from houses and codes and all these things and demands. I feel like fashion week and fashion, you have like 7 seasons to create, like cruise and resort and pre-fall and all these things. And I understand the stress of it, and then also award season, also our gala, Met Gala. It's a stressful time to make things and then understand the stress. But I feel like it's not an excuse to be racist at the same time. It's like you have your moments.
Well, but the thing is, you have to look at you are as a creative director representing a major fashion house.
Agree.
You are the face, so things you say in public then reflect upon the brand, which leads into the conversation about not only personal branding for him as a designer, because it doesn't matter how creative he was,
It's just this.
his remarks that he said just they just destroyed everything. Nobody wanted, Dior didn't want to have anything to do with him because it reflected upon his brand.
Yes.
It destroyed him, and then he eventually had to go into rehab, and he had to deal with his own personal monsters,
Which
um,
it's understandable that you have to kind of heal. Like I understand, like hurt people, but you have to heal to not put hurt on yourself, and those things have to be understandable. That, but that's not an understanding that he needed to get through these demons that he had.
right. But when he sat there, that is one thing. But when he sat there and bring it back around to the branding and what we do as a business person, because he was a business person first and foremost, designing for Dior. Those are two separate issues. You can't
You can't
publicly make words, say things
I
like
agree.
that, and then expect people to. They're not going to separate the brand you represent from the person who's making the statements. That's why Dior had to get rid of him, because it would have been a mistake as a brand to keep him, because
agree.
then people would have seen that as Dior supporting him,
Okay.
which destroys their brand.
And that's why I think too is like you have to be mindful of what you say or what you do. It's not. I think we have to realize that it tarnished his reputation as a designer that was in height doing amazing things, amazing creations, collections, and everything. And he had to, and he needed to understand that words come out and it may never take him back.
Especially on this day and age of the internet.
And that's why.
So let's step away from that. So him as a person, he had to step away and obviously recover from it. Let's talk about his journey. What do we know about his work at Mason Margiela?
Major Margiela. This is so. I think it's 2022. Like I think during the time, I think before the pandemic, he was signed as a creative director for Major Margiela. The collection was a strong review. There were so many viral moments, and then I just think the looks were so amazingly him. He didn't lose his designer's steam, and he made very collections that were transcendent on celebrities like Kim Kardashian for one thing, and then also just Lady Gaga. All these things happened, and I think the one thing that happened was fashion gave him more of a forgiveness of it. But I feel like sometimes also it was. I think because how good he was and how talented he was, I think people wanted him to come back in a bigger way, and he did.
So that was approximately 10 years from the time in 2011 when he left fashion, and we're talking, what, 11 years later? What was the impression that he got? How did people take his comeback? Was it positive? Were they forgiving of, like, were those remarks brought up during his comeback, or were there more positive things said
There
this
was a
time
mix.
around.
There's a mix. Here's the thing. She designed for Rihanna at the Met Gala that the Heavenly Bodies thing where she was wearing the what's that word again? The Archbishop or something like that. The Pope designed that dress, and then also Katy Perry wore something during that time too. And I think it was for the what's that pronounced right? Caro. But I think one of the things I was saying is that no matter how much he make beautiful clothing, it still was a target. They said things, they still thought about what happened. Even up to now, they still made it about him. The controversy was still here, so it wasn't gonna go away. But it was like you can't. I think for me, for my thing is that no matter how much recovery, no matter how much forgiveness, no matter how much time, no matter how much height of things, and you're doing your best to be in a good straight and arrow, you're still gonna have the stink on your face. Still, it's never gonna go away.
So, what did you think of that dress? A little bit too risque, perhaps?
For Rihanna,
The dress entirely, the design, the fact that you're literally touching upon religion, and it's almost mocking in a way.
I honestly think he's not. He's. I don't. I think he's just gonna still make shock value clothing that is gonna be talked about, and I think this was a look that I liked, but I also think it's never gonna be. It's gonna always. He's always gonna do something that's gonna cause some controversy or stir some controversy. It's like it's still gonna be. It doesn't make a difference.
Well, I mean, it evidently didn't stick around long enough as far as the talk of it.
Yeah, it didn't. But I think for me it was like I think he ended his tenure at Margiela I think two seasons ago, and one of the biggest collections he did to date was, and he did this for a year, was that his last whole couture collection was he had that porcelain faces and glass faces, and the makeup was done by who was I thinking about? Oh my god, I'm brain fart about this person now because Pat McGrath had done the makeup for this, and it was a beautiful collection. It was very much almost very to the like Gilded Ages, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. I think what we can all say is that he will make a collection that is gonna talk about and not it's gonna get recognition more than and versus his controversy, and that's what I think it would happen.
So, do you think the scene when he left Dior and basically went MIA in fashion all the way up until his return, did the changes after the controversy change perception in your mind for you?
Here's my thing about it, because I think we have to talk about how Met Gala does kind of bring back history, like Karl Lagerfeld's Met Gala when they did a exhibition on Karl Lagerfeld, and he said some things about fatphobic. He was racist. He said some things, and he didn't. And they still celebrate him. And but like you see where the Met Gala had the red carpet. Also, they're bringing people that are not. I'm not saying qualified, but they have history and stuff. And I think one last year was the Met Gala where Amazon bought out the thing, and then you saw who was running it, Jeff Bezos, and he got controversy for not like a lot of times we have to remember this cancel culture is not always going to be cancel culture, because the thing about it is you are going to be celebrated regardless of the money past.
All right. So my question is, did the world see him differently after he came back than what they saw before?
Okay.
I mean, you're not going to change his history. You're not going to change what he said, right?
I think, in my opinion, they see a great designer. They separate but they see a great designer. I think nonetheless they'll see a designer that has done amazing things in fashion.
Okay. I mean, because obviously someone saw a change in him because they took him back, not at Dior, but at
Margiela.
Margiela. Um, because a brand isn't when you come back after something like that, a personal brand isn't rebuilt by simply saying, "Ta-da, I'm different now." You actually have to see evidence, a change of behavior, um, in how you do things, right?
Yes.
So now in the last couple minutes, we're going to. So you talked about the Met Gala. You brought in a conversation about the expedition, right? It's obviously showing his greatest work before the incident and afterwards showing his greatest works. Now obviously you're not going to get away from what was said because it's going to be written and etched in people's minds.
Hmm.
So let's talk about your personal brand. Take it into that point. So in this, it taught us what you say, his words and what he did, the reaction and the consequences taught us what you say communicates value, even when you're not intentionally branding yourself, right?
Yes. And I think that's the thing we have to realize that change comes time, and I think what I think about now is like when you change for you have to change for yourself, not for others, and that's a key point. And that's why a lot of times you have to change for the better, not for the worse.
It it took him time because what led to his downfall was personal issues
Hmm.
and then uncontrolled behavior in public, which led to the remarks that he said, which then got him kicked out from Dior. And then the next 9, 11 years he had to take time to rebuild himself. It takes time. It's like 15 years later.
Yes.
It takes time. People are not going to forget, but they'll eventually get past it
Yes.
if they see an actual honest change, right?
Yeah.
Because your reputation starts with an apology. You begin the process, but then consistent change in behavior after the fact changes perception, right? And
Yeah.
that's what you saw in Galliano, right? He went from a great designer, 2011, made some remarks that shouldn't have been said, got kicked out of Dior, had to go into rehab, right? Because he was the the things he was using to cope with his stress were causing him issues,
Yes.
and then the eventual comeback.
Yeah. And that's how it is. And I think that's what we need to realize that.
So,
Mm,
your personal opinion.
yes.
Do you think you can move past that and see what designs he's created as a designer? And what are your thoughts?
Do I? And then this is. I may take a long call, but it's like, do I forget what he says? No. But do I think time has it changed some things? I can get past it as long as he's learned his lesson. That's the thing, and I think people see it. So yeah. I don't.
Because I mean, I'll agree. You know the old saying, "Actions speak louder than words."
Yes.
So as long as he continues, you see the designer, we can move past that. So you think it's because he's created controversy. Actually, no, the controversy was created when the Met Gala decided to choose him as the designer, and that's why all this was brought up from what happened in 2011.
Yes.
So with that being said, you can recognize his talent without excusing his behavior.
Yes.
Rehabilitation doesn't necessarily mean forgetting, but you can forgive the actions as long as you see change. And I think that's what the world's looking at, right? We're looking at designs, his talent. He had a momentary lapse in judgment. He's changed as a person. Let's move on.
Yes.
Any other closing thoughts before before we go ahead and close out today?
All I can say is just learn to live life and learn to love people as much as you can. That's what I'm gonna say. It is what it is.
So you're gonna see the Met Gala next year?
Of course I do. Because here's the thing I want to say, and this is what I'm gonna say from my personal standpoint. If you're gonna take the resources and a lot of these celebrities need to come through for this exhibition, and I mean you have a lot of examples. You have stylists that can pull out of the Dior archives, museums,
Right.
and you have designers that can do this. Do not fuck up. Sorry.
Well, the fact that Dior kicked him out says a lot about Dior, I think. Oh, you know, speaking of which, we have to talk about Roach Law at some point because his runway, but we'll do that at another time. There's a little controversy going on Facebook.
About what?
I'll let you know later. But anyway, so with that being said, maybe the question isn't whether fashion should forgive John Galliano. Maybe the question is how fashion chooses to remember him. Because we can remember the genius, we can acknowledge the harm, and perhaps the real test of the 2027 Met Gala will be whether the fashion industry can do both at the same time. And maybe there's a lesson for all of us. Our brands aren't built only by what we create, they're also built by what we say, how we behave, and what people remember about us.
Yes.
Because your personal brand isn't simply what you say it is, it's what people believe it is. It is how people perceive you in the long run. So that's it for the episode of Fashion Pulse. Thanks for listening today, and we'll see you next time.